人の左胸にはいつもサファリが広がっている。ジ・アースローダー新型サファリ誕生。
セガサターン。新世紀エヴァンゲリオンセカンドインプレッション漏れなくカードプレゼント。
There was a lot of things coming out in 1997, especially when you were a kid growing up in Japan, when you had all of these things like Neon Genesis Evangelion, and you also had Pokemon, which turned into an international phenomenon at the time. Pokemon at the time was very simple, and internationally it just grew to heights that no one thought that it could. You would go around collecting monsters, and you would just have fun with your friends or even kids at school, and you would just do a whole bunch of other stuff with them, like trading those cards or trading the Pokemon in your games and battling them. No one ever thought that this would come out to loads of merchandise that you would ever see just out in the public, and it affected parents and kids alike. Even looking back at the footage now, it looks like Pokemon was almost really similar to like a cult, and that's weird.
Are you ready for Pikachu? Let's go, Pikachu! Pikachu!
Yeah, that may be considered a little bit creepy, especially nowadays, but I guess that's no different from the Pokemon Go Fest that they had in Chicago a couple of years ago. In the modern age of 2018, we're able to go and collect Pokemon from our mobile devices of any kind and be able to meet up with people and play Pokemon all over again. Almost like they were able to in the show, and just meet with other people with the same interest and get all of these great things and all of these great interactions. But all of this does come at a cost, especially when you look at the history of Pokemon from back in 1997, like I mentioned earlier. Way back then in 1997, we were introduced to the Pokemon Porygon, and back then it was still just a relatively new event since we haven't had anything quite like this. It was just being introduced, and we didn't know anything about this Pokemon in particular other than it was a virtual Pokemon, one that only existed in the digital world. So what ended up happening was Pikachu had an electric shock that happened to have taken place while destroying some missiles due to an antivirus program, and that would lead into a lot of chaos. So when did all of this get started, and what exactly happened? Well, December 16th of 1997 at 6:40 p.m. is when we first get introduced to Pokemon Pocket Monsters over in Japan, when they came out with the episode Electric Soldier Porygon. At that point in the episode, Dr. Akihabara, who was there at the Pokemon Center in Matcha City, was helping them fix their computer problems. But in order to get into the computer system, they needed to transport Ash and Pikachu and company into the computer system, along with Team Rocket that had received a prototype Porygon as well. And what they were trying to do was go ahead and get this virus neutralized so that way they could transport Pokemon from another Pokemon Center. What happened was they uploaded a computer antivirus, so that way they could eliminate the computer virus, but mistakenly got Ash and company caught into the crossfire. So Pikachu just attacked the little missiles that came from the antivirus software, and when it did, it happened to attack and it exploded in flashes of lights at 12 hertz, which is pretty fast, of just a repetition of white, red, and blue lights. And sometimes it would mix in just so often and so frequently that it filled the screen completely, especially with kids sitting so close to the screen that it would make them have epileptic seizures. This episode in particular was still broadcast and watched by approximately 4.6 million households, and it affected 685 children, so 310 boys and 375 girls, and they had to be taken to the hospital just to see if anything was wrong with them while they had these seizures. Ultimately, what happened would some of them would have to stay there at the hospital, about 150 of them coincidentally, and only 2 people remained hospitalized for more than 2 weeks. And they complained about just the headaches and the dizziness, and some even said that they were suffering from blindness. The effects were so severe that some children were still transported to the hospital via ambulance, and they still complained about blurred vision, headaches, dizziness, and nausea, with even more complaints of seizures, blindness, convulsions, and even more so, the loss of consciousness. And this was after they watched that episode with all the flashing lights, even though it only took effect for just a couple of seconds. In order to somewhat understand what exactly happened, we have to understand what hertz are, and that's because we usually get warnings when watching anime or playing video games. For people with photosensitivity, it can cause their epileptic seizures to go off. It can just be something that triggers it. That's why some people can't drive whenever it's thunderstorming out, because the lightning can just strike so quick that it just triggers it. From Wikipedia, the hertz is the derived unit of frequency in the International System of Units, SI, and is defined as 1 cycle per second. So what that means in this example, as you can see, 1 hertz equals 1 second, and 2 hertz equals 0.5 seconds, making it more frequent as time goes on. To put that into perspective, the entire event of the red, white, black, and blue flashing lights took approximately 6 seconds. That means 12 hertz in just one single motion is 0.083 seconds. The flashing is sometimes so massive and just aggressive that I can't even look at it myself, and I don't even have a problem with epileptic seizures or anything like that. No photosensitivity or anything. But even then, it still kind of gives me a headache. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that this was back in 1997, when TVs weren't as advanced as they are now, where we have 60 Hz refresh rates or 120 Hz refresh rates. And even in virtual reality that we have now, 90 Hz has to be the limit. Otherwise, it'll give you that same nausea because you're interacting with something as if it's right in front of you in a virtual world. Now that we're done with all of the technical talk, it's time to get into what happened after the fact. The day after the events took place and all the children had went to the hospital, the news got around very, very quick. And before the next episode appeared, it was definitely clear that something needed to be done. So international news began to pick up and started running stories on it, like these here.
Els efectes especials utilitzats en una sèrie de dibuixos animats que s'està emetent a la televisió japonesa han desencadenat una reacció a més de 600 nens que ahir a la nit van haver d'ingressar a urgències de diferents hospitals.
この問題は昨夜7時前、テレビ東京系列で放送されたアニメ番組「ポケモン」を見ていた子どもたちが相次いで気分が悪くなったり引きつけを起こしたりする症状を訴えて病院に運ばれたものです。
729 crianças e jovens japoneses vão parar no hospital por causa de desenho animado.
For a while, that was all these news outlets would talk about, was how dangerous Pokemon was to your kid's health, especially after this one episode in particular had flashing lights that would take up the screen, and how it sent over 600 children to the hospital. And that would soon become an epidemic, but things would have to change, and for the better. So what would happen is the Japanese television company TV Tokyo would have to reevaluate what had happened during the anime making process, and Nintendo had them pull the entire franchise completely until they figured out a solution. After a while, these international news stories would run, but until the next episode of Pokemon would come out, or would be coming out, the next episode would be Holiday Hijinks. That was delayed, and instead they came out with this message that ran, that says, "To all our viewers, we are sincerely and deeply sorry for the high numerous reported cases of adverse physical effects suffered among those who watched last week's Pocket Monsters." After that hiatus, 4 months later, Pokemon would return to the air, but with a special announcement, something that would change the anime industry forever.
テレビの前のみんな、こんばんは。今日からアニメ「ポケットモンスター」の放送がまた始まることになりました。でもその前にちょっとお姉さんの大切な話を聞いてください。 大人の方もご一緒にお願いします。良い子のみんなはもう知っていると思いますが、去年の12月16日、ポケットモンスターを見て多くのお友達が急に具合が悪くなってしまいました。病院に運ばれた方もいました。まずその方々と関係者の皆さんに改めてお詫びを申し上げます。テレビを見ていてこれほどのことが起きたのは世界でも初めてでした。楽しみにしているみんなにはちょっとがっかりさせてしまいましたが、私たちはどうしてこんなことが起きたのか分かるまでしばらく番組をお休みすることにしました。すぐに調査のチームを作って専門家の先生にお話を伺いながら、原因や安心して見られるアニメの作り方について研究することにしたんです。こういった研究はテレビ局はもちろん国やお医者さんの間でも進められました。調査で分かったことは、赤と青の画面が1秒間に24回ものものすごい速さで切り替わっていく部分があって、それが主な原因だということでした。つまり赤と青がこんな風にものすごい速さで入れ替わっていたんですね。最初は特別に強い光が出ていたんではとか、何か危険な絵が入っていたんではなどと言われていましたが、そういったことではありません。またしましまや渦巻きなどの模様や赤い色の使い方にも注意しなければいけないことが分かりました。ですから私たちはこれから放送するポケットモンスターはもちろん、他のアニメも十分に気をつけて作っています。今日までポケモンがもう一度始まるようにとたくさんの応援をいただきました。いくつかご紹介します。まずこちらは埼玉の今津さん、関口くん、佐川さんです。ポケモンやめないでくださいと大きく書いてくれましたね。ピカピカ。それからこちらは札幌の伊藤夏菜さんです。可愛いイラストがあります。その他にもご覧のようにたくさんいただいたんです。皆さん本当にありがとうございました。ピカピカ。最後にもう一つ皆さんにお願いがあります。テレビを見るときは必ず明るいところで、できるだけ離れて見るようにしましょう。
As was explained in that video, the reason that they would not flash those certain colors or for a certain amount of time is because of new regulations and guidelines that were put in place. As was put here in the guidelines by TV Tokyo themselves, which I'll leave a link below, Television Tokyo has prepared the following production guidelines in the interest of minimizing the risk of viewer exposure to harmful stimuli. The production and broadcasting of animation conducted on the basis of a firm awareness of these guidelines will eliminate almost all risk emerging from such programs. 1. Avoid use of more than one light flash per each 1/3 second, 8 frames for film, 10 frames for television. 2. Because sudden cut changes or swift image changes will also cause the same impact as light flashes, avoid their use in excess of one such change per each 1/3 second. 3. Flashes and cut changes using the color isolated red will also be dangerous. However, there are no problems with color combinations which exclude isolated red when the luminance, brightness, is at the same level. 4. As a general rule, it is desirable to avoid use of systematic patterns, strips, bars, spirals, dartboards, etc., with varying luminance levels. Patterns which reverse are the most provocative, but those which drift are not provocative. According to Professor Harden, or the UK, an accepted authority on research into spasms caused by light hypersensitivity, as long as the television itself is used as a medium to send out images via light changes, it will be impossible to totally eliminate the risk of symptoms occurring as a result of light stimulation. That would mean that any anime to come after it would soon have to follow those new guidelines, meaning if they were to introduce flashing lights into a show, that they would have to be slowed down and they couldn't use those same isolation red techniques of flashing lights. So everything that you see now is a result of it going dim and slowed down to a certain frame rate. There were still a couple of questions here in the Western market about that banned Pokemon episode that is blocked worldwide by Nintendo and TV Tokyo. Those questions being, will it ever be released here stateside? No. And the other is, was it ever dubbed over in English? Well, that's kind of where things get a little bit sketchy. According to the late Madeline Joan Blaustein, or the voice of Meowth, she claims that it was in fact voiced over in English and that the dub was ready, and that was despite claims that by Veronica Taylor that it was never voiced over to begin with initially. She then reversed her claim just earlier this year on March 30th that there was a chance that it might have been voiced over, but before that she initially denied it. And then recently afterwards, back in 2016, the same person, Eric Stewart, that voices James and Brock, finally gave his opinion on it. And this video was brought to you by a certain person that allowed me to use it in this video, and it's also sourced on the Bulbapedia.
I'm sure you are aware of the banned Pokemon episode, Electric Shoulder Porygon, that sent over 600 children in Japan to hospital due to seizures.
With seizures, yes. I actually have a form of petty mom myself. When I give blood, I have a little mini seizure when that happens, so I'm not allowed to.
Yeah.
So I know all about that, yes.
From your point of view, because several voice actors from Pokemon, like the late Maddie Blostein says one thing and Veronica Taylor says another. From your point of view, was that specific episode ever dubbed in English?
Yeah. Sure. Sure we dubbed it. How else would I have seen it? It's never released. We dubbed it. Why? Did Maddie say we didn't? Maddie said we did.
She did, but Veronica Taylor said they didn't.
Yeah, I think we dubbed it. I remember dubbing it. I know we didn't air it.
So it was banned.
Yeah, it was banned. Well, yeah, flashing lights and things like that. Yeah.
It's kind of scary to think that something that took place 21 years ago is still having effects even to some extent this day. But even after those trials and tribulations of having a banned episode or two, we are still able to enjoy Pokemon as it is, even as grown adults, and sharing it with a new generation of children that are growing up with Nintendo DS's and 3DS's and all that other new technology to where they can enjoy something of their own. We all have the original 150 Pokemon that are still near and dear to our hearts, especially games like Pokemon Stadium where we first got to see our Pokemon battle in 3D, and even old school games like the original series that were on the Game Boy Color and even on the Game Boy Advance when we first got upgrades to those. 1997 and the year 2000 were just magical years for us because we finally got something that was from Japan and some of our first interactions with anime. It was truly something to behold, and that series belongs to a lot of people that are in my age group. And it's something that I think everyone can agree on is just something that's amazing. And even with new games like Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee coming out really soon, it would be hard to just dismiss Pokemon as a franchise that started it all for a lot of people, especially in the gaming atmosphere. But that's all from me. But I have one last message.
ではお待たせしました。いよいよ始まります。